Okay, we're live, but I think people are still joining the webinar.
So the first item is ready.
Okay, great. So Rich, go ahead.
Good morning. Welcome to the December 8th, 2020 public hearing of the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission. I will call the roll. Chair Carroll.
Here.
Commissioner Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Chen. Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Here.
And Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
So can you repeat that?
Here.
Great, thank you. All set.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the December 8th, 2020 public hearing of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We are holding this meeting, this public hearing via Zoom, and we are also live streaming it on our YouTube channel. So if you wish to watch the proceedings, please tune into our YouTube channel. And if you wish to participate and testify on any of the hearing items, please join the Zoom meeting at the estimated time listed on our public hearing agenda, which is on our website. And before each item, we'll also display the login, the meeting information so that you can call in or enter the Zoom meeting in order to testify. And with that, I will turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, to lead us through the hearing today.
Corey's out this morning, so I'll be reading things into the record.
Caroline Kane-Levy, our Deputy Director of Preservation.
Sure. The first item is item number 1, docket number 21-02938, 938 Garrison Avenue, the American Banknote Company printing plant, an individual landmark, Borough of the Bronx, block 2739, lot 15, an application for a certificate of appropriateness. A one-story utilitarian garage built in 1910 and enlarged in 1928, and part of an American round arch style printing plant complex designed by Kirby, Pettit, and Green and built between 1909 and 1911. The application is to install storefront infill and legalize the installation of windows without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits.
And commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. Please note that staff will be presenting the components of the proposal and the applicants are available for questions afterwards. And staff, you may begin. Leanne, you may begin. Leanne, if you're speaking, you're muted. So if you want to just control the screen and you can begin.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I seem to be having some difficulties with the screen control. There we go. Okay. Good morning, commissioners. Leanne Pollock, preservation staff. This project is located at 938 Garrison Avenue, which is a small utilitarian garage on the site of the American Banknote Company printing plant individual landmark site. It's seen here in this back corner. Here you can see where the garage is located relative to the other buildings on the site and with the designation photos here in the lower right. Note that at designation, many windows were already infilled with CMU, and with the exception of these two windows here on the Barretto Street facade, the historic steel multi-light windows had already been removed, and a few had even been replaced with these single light aluminum windows. These photos show the existing windows that were installed previously without LPC permits. The street-facing facade, which you can see in this photo and in this photo, feature fixed single light aluminum windows, while the facade that faces the interior parking lot in this picture and in this picture feature single light aluminum windows over hopper windows. The applicant is requesting to legalize these existing windows as installed. This photo in the upper left shows existing conditions at the main printing plant building, where the commission previously approved removal of the historic multi-light steel windows and installation of single light aluminum windows beneath transoms at the first floor and aluminum windows with an applied multi-light grid at the upper floors. This shows the existing and proposed elevations for Barretto Street. The applicant is also proposing to remove these roll-down garage doors and install new multi-light aluminum storefront infill within the existing opening. This shows the west courtyard or parking lot facing facade. This is the other garage door here that they're proposing to remove and also to replace with new storefront infill. These elevations show the street-facing Garrison Avenue facade here and the non-visible south courtyard elevation here and the existing window conditions. The building currently has no heating and cooling, so the applicant is also proposing to install a dropped ceiling that you can see here to conceal the needed mechanical ductwork and also to lower the finished ceiling height to make construction and heating and cooling more cost efficient. The soffits will feature an interior quality finish, and there will also be shades installed to help conceal the view of the drop ceiling from the exterior through the windows. Here are additional elevation details for the storefront infill and windows. Note that the storefront infill is recessed, you can see here, from the building face so that the applicant can retain the historic steel bumpers at the base. They're also proposing a mix of opaque and clear glass at the infill due to the proposed interior layout of the space, the dropped ceilings, and privacy and security concerns. The installed windows, as you can see here, also retain the historic location of the inset sash from the building face. These are the section details for the infill and windows, again showing the respective insets from the building face and simple rectilinear profiling. Raymond Arroyo, representing building ownership, and Gabriel Sarmiento, the architect, are available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Leanne. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions for Leanne or the applicants? All right, I don't see any questions. I just had one quick question. Is the aluminum framing expected to have a black finish or to
Yes.
look like what's in the photograph, so a black
Black finish.
anodized finish?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so if we don't have any questions, let's move to public testimony and see if we have anyone here to speak. So if you'd like to speak on this item, please raise your hand using the icon at the bottom of your screen. And I'll turn it over to Lisa Krasavich, our Executive Director, to walk us through any testimony.
Okay, thank you. And we don't have anybody that signed up to speak, and I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. All right, Rich, do we have any written testimony?
We do have a resolution from Bronx Community Board 2 recommending approval.
Okay, thank you. All right. Commissioners, any final questions for the applicant? Or the staff? Okay, I think we don't have any questions. So I'm going to start moving to unmute you or request to unmute you so that we can close the hearing and open our discussion. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion? Sorry. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
I second the motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll now move to our discussion. This is a utilitarian building on the site of the American Banknote Building, which is a very prominent individual landmark we're very proud of. And the proposal is to sort of adaptively reuse this building, and that involves modifying some openings which have been modified historically over time and installing new infill that will have a black finish. So Diana, would you like to start with this one?
Yeah, sure. I feel that it's approvable. Actually, I think that the installation is appropriate and is will not be really distinguishable from the other windows, and I feel that it'll actually, the removal of some of the infill will return the building closer to its historic appearance. And I think they're maintaining, it's mostly maintaining the dimensions and will be, kind of in line with some of the changes that have gone on in the building and other industrial buildings of this similar age. So I think I can approve it as presented.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I don't disagree.
Okay, Commissioner Devonshire,
I agree.
Commissioner Bland.
I agree too, and I think this is appropriate partly because this is a building that is a utilitarian accessory to the grand main building, which is really quite grand.
Okay, and Commissioner Lutfi,
I agree.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Appropriate.
Commissioner Gustafson.
I agree, but I think this building deserves 2 seconds longer of our attention. When we just designated the historic district right next door to this building, I went up there and took a look around, and this building is absolutely awesome. And I've only seen it from the Bruckner driving by, and it's just absolutely incredible. I'm so thrilled that somebody's actually going to put it to some good use. I am absolutely also appalled that it had no type of HVAC whatsoever in the building. It's amazing that it could have gotten this far that way. But in any event, it is certainly acceptable and approvable.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Yes, I agree with everything that's been said.
And Commissioner Holford Smith.
Agreed.
Great, and I agree as well. I think some of the changes will restore openings and rhythm. Other changes are sort of just in keeping with the industrial utilitarian character of this sort of ancillary building to the main building. And I think that the opaque glass won't detract from anything given its history as a garage and the history of changes here. And the way that they're handling the drop ceiling is also very sensitive. So Diana, would you make the motion?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. In the matter of a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of the Bronx, LPC 2102938, 938 Garrison Avenue, American Banknote Building, American Banknote Company printing plant, individual landmark. One-story utilitarian garage building built in 1910 and enlarged in 1928, and part of an American round arch style printing plant complex designed by Kirby, Petit and Green and built in 1909 to 1911. Application is to install storefront infill and legalize the installation of windows without LPC permits. I recommend approval, finding that most of the historic steel multi-light windows were removed and either replaced or the masonry openings infilled prior to the building's designation. Therefore, the work will not eliminate historic fabric, but most of the proposed changes are in secondary facades that are not highly designed. That the removal of infill from masonry openings will return the building closer to its historic appearance. That the proposed windows featuring fixed single light and aluminum windows at the Barretto Street Garrison Avenue and South Courtyard facades, and fixed single light aluminum windows over single light hopper windows at the West Courtyard facades are consistent with the single light windows with transoms installed at the ground floor of the main buildings. That the proposed storefront infill featuring multi-light aluminum framing with a simple profile and a combination of clear glass and opaque spandrel glass will maintain the dimensions of the existing garage door openings, will retain the historic steel bumpers at the base of the openings, and will be reflective of the functional change in use at the building and consistent with installations at other industrial buildings of similar age. That the black finish color of the windows and storefront infill is consistent with the historic windows and with existing windows and infill of the main buildings. That the interior drop ceiling located behind the storefront glazing will conceal new mechanical ductwork, will have a finished soffit, and will be obscured by roll-down shades. And that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the landmark.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, will you second that motion?
Happily seconding that motion.
Okay. And Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion carries.
That's approved. Thank you and good luck. And we'll move to the next item.
Next item is item number 2, docket number 19-41516, 56 Mid-Ox Street in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District, Borough of Brooklyn, Block 216, Lot 13, application for a certificate of appropriateness. A federal-style house with Greek Revival-style details built in 1829. The application is to construct a new building on a portion of the lot.
And commissioners, the applicant has joined the hearing and now has control of the screen. Please remember to unmute yourself and state your name for the record, and you may begin. You can activate the screen by clicking on the slide to advance.
Are we on?
Yes, please state your name for the record and begin the presentation.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Pratt from Pratt & Black Architects, and this is my partner, David Black. Hi
there. I'm sorry, we're having troubles getting the window to enlarge, biggen to the full size. Zoom ratio.
You go to the top of your screen. There's a bar with a black button that says View Options. You should be able to click on that and go to full screen.
Okay.
We are proposing
we have control of the screen. We can.
Yes, if you use your mouse and just click on the slide, you can now advance either using the mouse or the arrow keys.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you. Again, my name is Elizabeth Pratt from Pratt & Black Architects, and this is my partner, David Black. We are proposing a new 3-story single-family townhouse with basement and cellar at 56 Mid-Ox Street in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. The site is the empty section of an L-shaped lot shared with a single-family residence to the east. The empty section of the lot is roughly 25 feet square in the zoning district R7-1 in special district LH1, which imposes a limited height restriction of 50 feet. The lot is within 100 feet from the corner, which allows 100% lot coverage. The allowable build line along the south side of Mid-Ox Street to the street curb is about 13 feet 5 inches. However, property features, including stairs, porticos, planters, fences, and even parts of the buildings themselves, project across the property line. Looking at the Mid-Ox streetscape, we see a variety of building types, including firehouse, converted candy factory, school, and multi and single family residences. The building heights vary, as do the materials. We see colorful clapboard buildings with brick or stucco bases, and red, white, or yellow brick buildings, often with stone or cast stone accents and stone at the base. The tax lot photo from the 1940s on the left shows the original 3-story wood shingle building at the property line with a wraparound porch further out. The tax lot photo on the right shows the still existing clapboard building set back from its shingled neighbor. Our proposed site plans show the entry is at the basement level, 2 steps down from grade with a landing. The proposed basement plan has a kitchen and dining room. The proposed cellar has a media room, laundry, powder room, and mechanical room. The proposed first floor has a living room and powder room. The master bedroom and bath are on the second floor. The proposed third floor has 2 smaller bedrooms with access to a terrace, a shared hall bath, and a hatch to the roof. We are proposing a 41-foot 6-inch high brick building that falls under the approximate 45 to 50-foot high street wall. The cornice of the proposed building aligns with the eave of the existing house. Previously, we had proposed a sister to the existing clapboard house with a garage at grade. We collectively realized this building type was out of context in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District, with the exception of some iconic brick carriage houses, which we did not want to replicate. The front elevation of the proposed brick townhouse shows a cast stone base, lintel, sills, cornice, and coping. The windows are black Marvin residential casements with simulated divided lights, aluminum clad on the exterior, wood on the interior. The window layouts vary floor to floor, with the living room windows being the largest. The front door is wood with a glass transom. The main portion of the building projects 2 feet in front of the plane of the entry door. Top floor is set back another 2 foot 6 inches. The setbacks are designed to echo the undulations along the block and respect the scale of its clapboard neighbor. Side elevation shows the side setback and the setback at the top floor. These elevations show the cementitious wall coating on our building at the side and rear lot lines. Here is the building section showing the floor to floor heights and the depth of excavation at roughly 11'2". The wall section on the left shows the brick facade compliant with all codes and consistent with other brick construction nearby. The wall section to the right shows details of the cellar construction. We are working with engineers to provide shoring and support of excavation drawings. This photo montage documents the undulating building facades, features stairs, fences, planters on the south side of Middag from Henry to Hicks Street. Brooklyn Heights is a true palimpsest of generations of architectural styles. Each building is unique and discrete. They share some features such as a projecting bay, a recessed top floor, change of material at the base, casement windows. But even the details they share are rarely done the same way twice. We are proposing a muted light grayish red brick for the facade that we feel works well with the tone of the existing house and the predominantly red brick buildings on the block. This is a rendering of the building looking southeast. And this is a rendering of the building looking southwest. In conclusion, our goal has been to achieve a standalone townhouse that respects the scale of its neighbor, fits nicely into the Middag streetscape, and blends into the fabric of the Brooklyn Heights Historic District beyond. We would like to thank the Brooklyn Heights Association, with whom we have been working closely for the last 10 months to arrive at this design. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so just to explain a little bit of the context and history here, the commissioners, we saw a proposal for a wood frame building on this site with a garage at the ground floor. And at that time, at that public hearing, we reviewed the application, we listened to testimony, and we took no action. And many of our comments focused on the typology of the building, given that the garage seemed to be a priority. And so I think that the idea of a wood frame house seemed like it could be appropriate, but a wood frame house with a garage at the ground floor seemed like a hybrid typology. And I think we recommended either sort of doing a wood frame house or looking, if they wanted the garage, looking at some of the carriage houses as models. So we took no action, and the proposal, it has been completely redesigned and rethought and is back before us today, and we're holding a new hearing for it. And I believe the garage is now eliminated and they're proposing this brick residential building. So that's how we got to where we are today. Does anyone have any questions about the application, the design, the details? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson? And just accept my request to unmute you.
Oh, I have a question on connection. If you go to your A402 of your presentation, I mean, in this elevation, you have 3 setbacks on your building. You have a form with 3 setbacks. And I'm looking at your precedent, and I don't see anyone on 402. Go to 402.
Right.
Okay, and I'm looking here to see in your examples anything that relates to what you're showing in your building, and I don't see it. So the idea of I don't get the continuity of this with your presentation.
Can I just, I'm just trying to understand the question.
But the formal device, you're using 3 setbacks, 1, 2, 3, right? And your elevation.
Yes.
And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, you're showing me examples, and I'm saying maybe there's an example that shows 3 setbacks, and I don't see it.
Yes, and this montage, there is examples of 2 setbacks. There's examples of, punched out bays that have, angled sides, but not an example of 2 setbacks within the same building. There's obviously a couple in the center showing the top floor being set back, but it's true, there's not an example that we have shown here that has the 2.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Goldblum.
You.
Whoops, I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute you. Okay.
There you go. All right, thanks. Sorry about that. Looking at this view, how would you characterize your design? It seems to have historical elements, yet it also goes out of its way to differentiate itself in some ways, with the window choice, the design of the setbacks that Everardo talked about. I mean, is it your intention that this is something that is viewed as a kind of historicist building that should blend in with the existing buildings and be similar to them, or is this a more is this meant to stand out, something in between? Help me.
I think one of the things we really worked to achieve was a building that is standalone, that works as a.
I understand what your intention is.
That we wanted to look balanced as a composition, and then of course in scale with its neighbors, and blending in so it looks like it's part of the overall fabric. And one of the important things that we were trying to express is that if you walk all around Brooklyn Heights, there's no end to the variety of buildings and the surprises that you might discover. And the type of design works when there is a kind of balance, and there's a beauty to that. So that's really what we were going towards, something that had its own unique appearance and that blended in.
All right, well, thank you.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Thanks, Sarah. Would you explain there's a strange contrast to me between that very formal ground floor and tumbled brick on the upper stories. I would challenge you to find a rustic tumbled brick in Brooklyn Heights unless it was a poorly repointed facade on a building. Can you explain what your idea was behind that? I mean, it's a very rustic looking material.
So agreed, and we are actually not offering a tumbled version of this brick. It was really meant for color only. There is a squared edge brick that we would propose for this, and just did not include that detail on the brick sheet. So it's meant to be a very kind of squared off modular.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Bland.
Thank you. My question has to do with zoning. Is there any issue about zoning that has led you to these setbacks?
No, there's the setbacks. We could go straight up with the building to 50 feet.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Right, and Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Lutfi, did we lose you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is also about setback. So this double setback, is it the same depth as the setback of the original building that was on the site?
So the front plane of the building, if we carried it all the way across, would be the same point of projection of the original building. It's roughly 8 feet. So that projecting first bay, that bay going straight across, that would be roughly 8 feet off of the face of the collaborative building. So we cut into that because as a group, we felt that it was overpowering too much the collaborative building, and we wanted a little relief from it without impacting too drastically the interiors, because we're working with a very tight footprint and with stairs that needed to work, et cetera. But we pushed it to the point that we could.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Hey, Commissioner Shamir Barron.
I'm trying to understand, I may have missed something, that you have a sheet called proposed street elevations, which is, what number is this? Gosh, I missed it. No, I'm sorry. And I don't, and the rear elevation, I think I might be a little confused about what you're proposing. Can you, it's page 7, I'm sorry, page 7 and 8. Oh, one more. That's it. That one. What is this? What? Yeah, back.
This one?
No, the one you did just previous.
I'm trying to get back to that.
Okay. This is the original. This was the original proposal that we brought in front of Landmarks. That was
not doing this.
That we are not doing. This is the original proposal. The LPC senior staff asked us to put this elevation in just to show where we came from. And we are proposing an entirely different building.
Yeah.
And so we just wanted to have it as a reference of where we started.
And then the rear elevation.
Yes.
What's going on there?
This is a lot line.
Yeah.
And we are unable to have windows in a lot line unless the building is sprinklered. And because it's 3 stories, we are not sprinklering it.
So there are no fenestrations entirely on that
back side.
Rear wall.
No.
Then someone could build right up to that.
Yes, somebody is, I mean, code-wise, we're not looking at considering the building lot adjacent in terms of codes and feasibility, but somebody could build right up to that point technically. On the side where the existing 2 bay garages,
Yeah.
That could be, somebody could, eventually build straight up and cover the windows. There are special expensive lot line windows that we could ask our client if she wants to invest in that, but that's not what we're proposing today.
And they won't provide legal.
And they won't provide
Similar
legal
to
light and
this.
air. It's basically we're anticipating buildings at those locations. It's not a facade that we would propose as a design. It's more in anticipation of what could potentially be there, covering it.
Again, rear as well, not just side.
That's right, because we are able, because of our position within 100 feet of the corner, we are able to build on 100% of our lot, which is 25 by 25. So that goes straight back. Behind is somebody else's lot. Not a setback, not a garden.
There's no rear yard.
No rear yard. There's zero rear yard on this property.
Okay, thanks.
But on the neighbor's property, there's a rear yard, right?
There is on the neighbor's property a rear yard.
They theoretically never block your back facade, right?
They could.
You're saying.
Right. They have a rear. You're right. They have
they're on a corner lot as well.
Right.
So they could build all the way back there.
Right. As
They
David
can't have
Black
legal
is
light and air.
suggesting that they could build all the way back there. They would not have legal light and air, but they're on a corner lot as well, within that 100 feet of corner. So technically they could.
Okay, other questions?
Right, there's building on, to the right of this building, you can see there's a flat doing the same thing, anticipating potential building there.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, I don't see any questions. So why don't we move to public testimony, and we may have more questions after that. So if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Lisa Kersavage to lead us through the testimony.
Great, thank you. We had two people signed up. So Kelly Carroll, I've brought you in. Let's see, Kelly.
There we go. Good morning, Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. An intervention in this location calls for a creation or facsimile, neither of which are proposed. The proposed structure is not a peer of the architectural palimpsest of Midoff Street, which offers an incredible amount of variation and design inspiration to draw from. The proposed masonry hue, arbitrary setbacks, and a slab of a side wall are not appropriate to the Brooklyn Heights Historic District, and we hope that commissioners will encourage further study. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Next, we have Judy Stanton. And Judy, I've just brought you in.
Now can you hear me? I don't know if you can see.
We can.
Okay.
And we can see you.
Judy Stanton for the Brooklyn Heights Association. We want to thank this applicant for sharing updates with our committee as the design has evolved from the concept first presented to the commission, and for considering our suggestions. Our building feels this committee's current design has come a long way from its original iteration. However, we are still not enthusiastic. Scale continues to be a challenge. Setting back the plane of the door does a lot to soften the massing and respect the scale of the 1820s house next door. The setback is an improvement over the project's original design. But we feel that including the top of story and anything close to its original, we feel that including the top story and anything close to its current massing continues to be the problematic. For example, in trying to minimize the story's impact, the design proposes only a small coping across the top. This introduces more problems than it solves. Because the house weakly terminates at its top, The coping is at odds with the muscular early Greek revival frieze band of the 1820s house, and more generally is not contextual with those with house cornices across our historic district. Our committee struggled with the choice of tumbled mist color for the brick. Theoretically, the color on its own could be acceptable, even though most other brick houses in our district are a shade of red. But we feel that the combination of gray brick, the lintel and sill style, and the steel windows is not contextual. If the applicant is committed to the other design elements, then we would suggest a more traditional brick color. In the end, we're not entirely convinced that this building reads as a house. The small frame house that was demolished here in the 1940s was interesting for its modesty and small scale porch and asymmetry. A new porch on the public right-of-way is not feasible today, but the small scale and the asymmetry could have been easily incorporated into the new design. Varying the at-grade window openings from those above could help. Some sort of minimal framing around the door and perhaps matching it on those ground floor windows could also help. The use of coarse cast stone at the basement level adds formal weight, but the simple brick to grade design of the adjacent tenements might be a more appropriate approach. And now that the entry has been depressed by a few steps into the basement, the design could have looked for inspiration to the varied precedents in the neighborhood for treating lowered entryways in houses where the stoop was removed. Thank you.
Lisa, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Judy. And I don't see anybody else with their hands raised.
All right. And Rich, do we have any written testimony?
No other additional written testimony, but should note that Brooklyn Community Board 2 waived review of this application.
Okay. All right. I'd like to turn back to the applicants and ask if you'd like to respond to the testimony, particularly the comments about the massing, the fenestration, the sort of level of detail and materials.
So I have to admit we're a little surprised at some of the comments, which we feel like we're hearing for the first time. But we recognize that the committee is is a lot of members, and to try to negotiate everybody's opinion is very difficult and to be inclusive. And we definitely feel that they were a great group to work with, and agree that the project has come a long way. The windows are really residential windows. They're not double hung, but they're casement. They're not steel. They're Marvin, typical residential series, aluminum, however, but for really longevity, if it came down to wanting a wood window instead, the detail and the design and the look would be the same. We were hard pressed going around Brooklyn Heights to understand building windows were metal or wood. That may not be the exact issue, but the scale of the windows is matching the next door. We took care not to make it too overscaled and industrial. There was also the real issue of not looking like we were making a formal proposal. The base material, Mid-Oak Street is pretty informal. There are some clapboard buildings that are very, kind of fussed over, but it's very, kind of humble. And we did echo the change in base material that is evident along the street to help also break up the mass. And there is a difference in the base material of the building next door as well. And we really tried to tailor it to a sort of more humble appearance that worked with the street. So, the issue of the scale and the setbacks, we felt that we were being very responsive to the comments to respect the building next door and to, try to set back the top floor. At one point, we started having a building that went straight up, had the same number of working simply on fenestration and scale, et cetera. But there was a real kind of push that we all kind of jumped on board with to really kind of articulate it. And we do agree that and believe that the articulation is something that you see along the street face, and thought that it blended well, and was really responsive to that. So, I mean, specific issues, coping details, if it came down to revising those, we would be happy to take suggestions.
Brick color.
And brick color, we know that there's, continues to be issues regarding the color of the brick, and we want to get it right. We want it to be something that Landmarks approves, that our client is happy with. And so we would be pleased to move forward with those minor details.
Thank you. So, just a question about a follow-up question on the height, because I know that when you started with the idea of the row house with the garage and the wood frame house with the garage and the ground floor, the height was an issue because you were taking up the ground floor for garage use. And so in order to get your needed space, the building was a little bit taller. And now that you don't have the garage at the ground floor, did that not give you an opportunity to lower the building by a floor?
Do you want to say?
No, go ahead.
So the opportunity was really posed to us, at least as we understood it, that if we were going to have a garage, and that would be the primary importance for our clients, that we really wouldn't be able to have it as high as we wanted, and we would have to, really, we could fight for a 3-story, but the carriage houses in the area are really 2 stories walking around, rarely 3 stories with a upper floor. And my client opted to go with a brick build that did not have a garage to get the square footage and the additional floor. Again, the footprint is so small that it's very hard to fit in a whole program. We came back from LPC saying, this is really the option. You want a shorter building with a garage, and the garage was important. I mean, they use that parking lot right now for their cars. I mean, it's sad that they have to give that up, but they went for a taller building without a garage because we felt that there's so many tall 4-story brick buildings in Brooklyn Heights that we felt it was a better risk to take to go that direction than to try to come back with a higher carriage house style.
Okay, so your height is, you think, comparable to other row houses. It's just the setbacks that makes it look in some ways bigger because it's calling attention to that top floor, setting it back.
It's interesting because we were thinking that because we're setting it back, we are taking away from the height. So it's interesting that it appears to be drawing attention to it. From the street level, when you're actually walking around, like in front of the building, you're really not going to read that top floor. We were very careful to try to show it in its real light as you are looking at it obliquely, to not try to kind of hide its appearance, but we do want to kind of not draw too much attention to it, or otherwise we would have brought it straight up. And that was something that the group, the Brooklyn Heights Association, that we worked together with to sort of make work. They originally asked for it to be further back, but it really severely compromised the rooms on that floor. And so we came to a negotiated solution of having it put a little bit less setback.
Commissioners, do you have any final questions? All right, I'm going to start requesting to unmute you so that we can move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. So Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Okay, and Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you second that motion?
Second the motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And I'm going to turn to our resident commissioner, Vice Chair Bland. Would you lead this discussion?
I will start it in any event. Who knows if I'm leading it?
Right.
This is a tricky problem to solve. And I think the length of time that this applicant has been working on it has kind of proven that. I think moving away from the last scheme, which was an attempt to overly relate maybe to the existing 1829 house, is the right move. So certainly that's a check in the right direction. But what makes this unusual and difficult to solve as a house, a 25 by 25 with three blank walls, also makes it kind of a challenge just as architectural layout. There are three houses, I think, right on the back street from this. I think that's Orange Street, which are very tiny as well. I don't know if the applicant has looked at those houses. I used to have a friend that lived in one of them, and it was a very interesting kind of layout. And that might be something to also be aware of. But I think, the applicant used the word fussed over, and I didn't want to use that word, but since she did, I'm going to say, I think this is slightly fussed over too much. There's just a little bit too much going on, I think, in such a small house. And I think the brick color is probably wrong, but that may not be the issue. I think it's the multiple setbacks that make it somehow strange as opposed to contextual. And I'm just looking at the two brick buildings. I guess they're tenements, perhaps on either side, and wondering if, as has been suggested, just going straight up, just a simple straight up building might not be the better approach here, and keep it simple. And maybe it could be the full height. Maybe that's okay. If it's not, if it's a lower building, maybe it needs a cornice at the lower setback, and then that top floor, which I don't necessarily object to, if it's kind of less visible, and maybe a cornice across the top. Either way, I'm not sure, and I'm not trying to design the building either, whether it's perceived as a 3-story mass with a setback, or whether it's just perceived as a 4-story building, is neither here nor there at this point for me. I think I could live with either if it's done right. I think there's almost always an attempt, which I shy away from, for searching for precedent. And sure, we want precedent. We want to see that there's other, that the vernacular, that the context is somehow understood. When we try too hard to bring it all into one little building, sometimes we end up with a building which is a compromise here and there. And I think we need to, in this case, we need to look back at the building just as a simple piece of architecture, and worry a little bit less about exact context here and there and whatever. And I think we'll find kind of simpler examples. There may be an example. I walk by it often, and I can't quite remember. I think it's in the next block west and on the other side of the street. It's a brick building. It does have some sort of a garage or something in the basement. It goes up 3 or 4 floors above it. That might be something to look at too. Anyway, I think it's stepping away from where you were is the right direction, but I don't think we're quite there yet.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
So this is a very challenging site, and I have to say I'm very sympathetic to the fact that there's not a lot of opportunities for light and air here on the other side of the building. That said, I think I feel like maybe this was overthought. And actually, I think it could have worked if they had stayed with the original clapboard design and just changed the bottom and moved moved the garage over, which I don't have a problem with at all. And then it would have harmonized, even though there would have been an issue in terms of overwhelm with a building next to it, which is going to be here no matter what. That's not going to change. I think it would have at least harmonized with that building and worked within the context of the block. This is a very special block, Meadow Street. It has a lot going on. It has its own little quirky personality, as do some of the fruit streets. I think the attempt to reach out to the broader Brooklyn Heights neighborhood maybe isn't quite appropriate. And there is a lot of opportunity here to draw from, but still, create a slightly singular building. So I think going back the other way could work. I also happen to agree with Fred that another approach would be to look toward the buildings to the right and left and speak to them on the design. I don't think the tumbled brick works at all. And the windows don't work. And this idea of having these, these two different, base that, as Michael Devonshire said, alluded to, is like a very formal, and then something that is not above it doesn't work. So as a whole, this is really struggling, I think, and needs another look. And I think within the context of what's around it, it needs to change. But I think there are two ways that they can go here.
Thank you. And when you say the windows don't work, do you mean the aluminum multi-light configuration, or the size of the openings themselves and the sort of horizontality?
I think I'm not having a problem with the aluminum windows, black aluminum windows, but the style isn't working.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
In my notes I wrote, the building should be simplified, and I agree with some of the commissioners that maybe the two examples on the left and right hand side could work if it were just a simple facade. The overlap of the form makes it too dominant for me, so that's the reason I brought up that issue. I think the windows, one big beautiful window could work, but right now it doesn't. In this particular presentation, and I think the corner view, it's interesting when we look at this particular view. The corner view of the right-hand building, it fits in perfectly because of the color, I think. And on their building, if you look at the corner becomes so dominant. The corner angle view becomes so dominant. I think they should just think of the color. Think of another color, kind of a recessive color. So the form is, the plane isn't as powerful, but just a recessive volume. And I think if they simplified it, it would work quite well.
Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Well, we're giving them a lot of feedback here. I think not to go into every detail here, but the thing that sort of strikes me most is that the facade of this building looks more like the rear facade of a building than it does the front facade. And that has to do with the setbacks and the balcony, et cetera. Most of the buildings in the district are, for lack of a better word, have a flat facade, and the dimension comes from, stoops and lintels and cornices, et cetera, and not from the actual changes in the facade. And that, I agree with Fred. I don't want to use the word precedent here, but it does have to have some relationship to the streetscape and the context of what's around it. And that's the thing that's most striking to me. And I could accept if it was actually, if you actually used the closest to the sidewalk dimension and ran that across the entire front of the building. And I'm not concerned about the height of it overall, but because then I think it would actually be more contextual.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
So I'm in agreement with a lot of the comments and Fred's about the possibility of a kind of much simpler facade arrangement, the issue about these setbacks looking as though they are, it's something that we're more familiar or used to seeing in a rear condition. But, strangely, I think had they come to us and said, we're interested in a facade here that is completely sort of not typical of any of the forms in the district. Our interest is to get as much light into the front of this building because we have no ability to get light in the back. And so we're going to use a different kind of system on the front. Or like the building next to the garage that uses the sides of the setbacks to let light in, whether that happened to sort of closer to the back or to the front. I feel like I would have been very open to a completely different or contemporary interpretation here that would have, not attempted to conform to a historic configuration. So I'm sort of, so that's just all to say that I'm not so much, I'm having a problem less so with the issue about it being different, but the fact that it is not sort of different enough with an objective, either a programmatic objective that we don't need to know about that, the use issue, but a programmatic objective that makes the formal in sort of innovation acceptable. So on the other hand, I really am very, as Judy said, sympathetic with, I think they've tried very hard to make sense of our previous comments and to try to kind of make this thing fit in. I just think it doesn't quite do it yet. I'm sorry to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford-Smith.
Yes, I agree with a lot of the comments that have already been said, and I particularly agree with Adi that they could have taken a different approach and made it even more, as the word they use was standalone, unique. But I think it's a little bit of a hybrid at this point, and I think that's what we're all kind of struggling with. So I don't want to really add any more direction than already has been given, but I think simplifying it would certainly go a long way. And I think that one thing that the color of the brick is, I think, throwing everybody off. And I think something more in line with the neighbors would be more appropriate, and perhaps a single facade. But.
Okay. All right, great. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, to me, the two biggest things that would make this more contextual would be, one, not to have the number of setbacks. I think there could be one at the top, but I think that the front facade should not be set at the second facade should not be set back in effect. And also I think the brick, the color, and what Michael Devonshire pointed out about, the quality of it and how it doesn't seem to quite work with the base, the different brick with a different color. I think those two things would go a long way toward making this more contextual. And I actually don't have a problem with the total height. And I think setting back the top floor is okay. I wouldn't have a problem with that. So those are my principal comments about it.
Okay. And Commissioner Goldblum?
Thank you. I feel bad for these guys. You know, it's a hard. The funny thing about this site is that the street is so diverse, so varied, that really, you know, the world's your oyster. You could pick to go any way you want. And this scheme, you know, we had very pointed comments last time, and so this scheme just looks like we beat you into a corner and you were cowering and struggling to pick apart our comments and find the solution that fit all the keys. And it just looks that way. It just looks like it's been sapped of energy, sapped of cohesiveness. It looks like to me like a kind of a Nehemiah type house, a spec house that you'd see in Queens with the, you know, the extended windows, but the attenuated lintels, the weak T cornice that was referred to in the testimony, the rustication on one part of the base but not on another part of the base. It's kind of it's just diluted too much. And I think what Adi and are speaking to, and Fred as well, is that this building can be itself. It can be its own thing. It should be its own thing. It's on a block of amazing variety. It can stand to not be something that's whipped into a corner. It should be a building that proudly sits on its site like the rest of the buildings, proud of its difference, and with an internal integrity, whether that is traditional in style or contemporary in style, that stands up against a street of equally identifiable individual buildings. On a much more mundane level, I would say that since your sidewall is so exposed, and since you chose not to put lot line windows into it at all, even though you could by code, and the expense is not that great for a steel window if it's small, you should definitely make the back and the side of the building out of brick and not out of stucco. I think it just makes the building look that much cheaper, and it will remain visible. The odds are very much against your neighbors, at least in the backyard, on the back facade, of ever covering your rear windows, even though they could. It's pretty unlikely. And since it is visible to other buildings in the district, it should definitely be brick. And I would strongly suggest that you consider lot line windows, which would be small and would have to be made out of steel, but they would not be a bank-breaking affair, and they would help animate facades, not to mention animate the interior in a way that is very typical of the district and would make your building fit into the district better.
Commissioner Devonshire?
Thanks, Sarah. I don't have a lot to add. I think there's plenty of direction. I think the one clarification, I asked about the tumbled brick, and the applicant said that it's not the tumbled brick, it's just the color, and I'm okay with the color. I think a couple of allusions were made to the tumbled brick. In any case, I would just say simplify, simplify, simplify.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we won't take any action today. We're going to ask you to go back and think about this one more time. I know you've been working on it a very long time and kind of struggling with an approach here. And I think that our commissioners are fairly open to approach. You know, I think a wood frame house perhaps without the garage, makes it look more like wood frame houses, or a simplified brick house, maybe with a different color and different combination of materials between base and top, could be like some of the more simple, modest brick houses on the street, or something that is sort of its unique contemporary approach that speaks to its unique condition. So I think there are a number of approaches, but each one would have a certain set of sort of standards, features, proportions that would follow those. So I think you want to go back and sort of think about, or have your client think about, what they really want here, and then the staff will continue to help you to work through a design. I mean, I think the simplest route today is just sort of simplifying, but if you want to do something else, there's something opportunity for that as well. And so we'll take no action and ask you to continue to work with the staff as you move through this process. And we appreciate the challenges of the site and your efforts here. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to item number 3, docket number 20-05535, 39 Chauncey Street in the Stuyvesant Heights Historic District, Borough of Brooklyn, Block 1685, Lot 79, an application for a certificate of appropriateness, a vacant lot formerly the site of a Neo-Georgian Romanesque Revival style apartment house designed by John L. Young and built in 1899, and a vernacular house built prior to 1870. Both demolished by the Department of Housing Preservation and Development in 1995 and 2002, respectively, after emergency declarations of unsafe conditions. The application is to construct a new building.
And commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. Please remember to unmute yourself and state your name for the record. You can advance the slides using the mouse or arrow keys, and you may begin. So Tom, if you could just unmute yourself.
Unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me try this too. So if I hit that, no. View options, fit in window. How do I control the screen?
So you just use your mouse and click on the slide that you see here.
There we go. Got it.
Right, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yes, good morning, commissioners. This is Tom Vandenbout for NV Design Architecture. I'm gonna start off the presentation the way you're not supposed to, apologizing for my, what I'm being told is an unstable connection periodically from sunny Oaxaca. Our proposal is to build a set of 4 single-family row houses at the corner of Lewis Avenue and Chauncey Street in Stuyvesant Heights Historic District. Let's see if this works. Yeah. So can you see my cursor when I move that?
Yes.
No. Yes? Okay. The site is located at the southwest corner of the block, at essentially the corner of the district across from Fulton Park, where Lewis traditionally ended right at Fulton Street. And over the years, this area has had a number of transformations. This block being one of them. Obviously, the 2 houses that sat on the current site were demolished for I guess good reason, relatively recently, and have remained vacant since. Originally, the building on the corner essentially filled up the entire lot from front to back and to the corner. I think there's a historic photo in the next slide. There it is. So there was a large apartment building there that had an entry on Lewis in the middle and a series of stores, as evidenced by the Sanborn map here, that really activated this corner. Lewis also had, in the earliest Sanborn map, many of the lots faced Lewis Avenue. That got changed. You can see very early on in the 20th century, when those lots were essentially combined for a large set of sort of, I guess they're sort of duplexes. They're conjoined in pairs, set of 7, so 14 row houses on Bainbridge. And one aspect of that development, aside from changing the orientation of the corner, was the creation of an easement down the back, which was sort of a dead-end alley that allowed for parking and along the back of all of those properties. Then the next big transformation, I think, to this area was the creation of a what I assume was urban renewal, a block further west that effectively cut Bainbridge off. If you go further down the block here on Bainbridge from Lewis, it ends in a cul-de-sac. And that through traffic is cut off. And when that happened, also the existing fabric that had been at the corner of Lewis and Fulton was removed. For some unknown reason to me, it's still completely open, but it's a very, very weak corner. It doesn't really extend the Fulton Park and remains open, and then allowed a connection, a direct vehicular connection between Lewis and Troy Avenue, south of Fulton, which is all to say that this, the fabric, the pattern of the block was interrupted, and the fabric of the residential fabric was eroded at this corner of the neighborhood. And it became a sort of vehicular entrance, if you will, coming north or from Fulton Street and from Troy Avenue into what is now the district. It's sort of a gateway and introduction to the district that it wasn't before. So this is the current open lot, fenced off. You can see in the lower left, this is the mouth of that sort of parking easement with a lovely historic chain link fence. The backs of the pairs on Bainbridge in their different colors of brick, and the 3 remaining wood frame houses on Chauncey. 2 of which still have their porches. The third one, I think, has been missing its porch for a while, as evidenced by the historic photos. There's that one. This is, oops. This is the wood house that was removed. And I kind of love these historic photos. This guy standing in front didn't appear to move an inch between photos. So, and one other little detail that affected our concept for the site was when the last wood house came down, 2 sort of shared chimney stacks remained, and we were very concerned about any development that would get anywhere close to those, and the viability of this house really adversely affecting that structure. So we came to a scheme that essentially combined the zoning lots at the corner, the two lots facing Chauncey, and divided them then into small tax lots facing Lewis Avenue. So that's what's being proposed, are 4 separately owned houses, single-family houses, their own connection to the street on Lewis Avenue, setting back from the 2-story wood frame house, creating small rear yards that are not required by zoning, but effectively by zoning are called a side yard since it's one zoning lot. All light and air for these is off of Lewis. The footprint of the building is essentially 30 feet. And they get all their light and air from Lewis. Our proposal sets back to line up to the front of both the buildings on Lewis and Chauncey. So we have a large, say, front or side yard at the corner lot, and then a very diminutive strip of planting that's similar to the neighbors on Chauncey. So I'm sure you well know the district is really defined by its intact sets of row houses, and that's how we came upon the idea of creating a new row rather than a single large apartment building. We had actually been approached by a previous potential owner to develop an apartment building there, and we ran into a fair amount of trouble aside from light and air. There were elevators, potentially parking, all which really increased the scale of this building, which we felt uncomfortable with, and ultimately that owner didn't purchase the property. These are the neighbors, the immediate neighbors. Those are the 3 wood frame houses facing the park on Chauncey. This is the row that essentially makes up the rest of that block across from Fulton Park on Chauncey. And these are the sort of sets of pairs on Bainbridge. They appear to be 2-story, but they're actually 3. There's parking at that level on the back. They have this sort of double raised front yard with a large setback. This is looking at some of the corner, the corner properties at the other end of the block, on our block, that show some side entries, but also again they sort of, especially here, you see these sort of pairs that aren't dissimilar to the ones at the other end of the block, although much more grand. These are looking at some bay windows. This is just elements that we've included in our design that you'll see, but we have a bay element that faces the park at the corner property. And then this is looking at various mansards that are either, some of them are quite nice, some of them are quite not nice. We have a mansard-ish element in our design as well, to sort of lower the roof line to hopefully harmonize with the neighbors somewhat. So these are our two main facades, Lewis and Chauncey, as proposed. So you can see we've divided this up into essentially 3 essentially equal row houses, and then a corner that allows for fenestration facing the park, as well as this sort of large bay window element that essentially sits in its garden or front yard. You can see the setback from the neighbor to avoid that chimney and just provide a little relief and have this stand alone. This gap is obviously where that parking easement is, or alley easement. So on this side, starting at the bottom, we've raised our ground floor up slightly, just to provide a little relief from those entries, and relief between those entries and the sidewalk. This is a relatively busy sidewalk, and we've done that. We've taken the cues for the design of that from this neighbor that establishes a sort of low wall with planting on top of it. We've expanded that a little bit to include some of the inevitable sort of areaway for trash containers and the like. And then we've extended that wall all the way to the front property line to sort of maintain that element out and hold a termination to an extension of the iron fences that exist along Chauncey facing the park. So that exists and holds the sort of garden, and you get a slightly stronger, we feel, corner that will hold that garden and divide the public from the private there a little bit. Then we obviously have a living and kitchen floor. There's and 2-bedroom floors above that. And those windows wrap the corner. Then we have a metal standing seam roof that is interrupted by a continuation of the brick wall up that provides some rhythm and differentiation between each of these houses that helps them read as separate houses. And then there's a setback penthouse. You'll note that on each of the end units, that is simply a required by code bulkhead that exists on the two in between as well, but then the space between those we've enclosed for a small rooftop room. And we felt that that a single element above the roof line of the building was sort of simpler and less obtrusive than a series of 4. So these are, that went fast. This is just slightly larger. We have very, very simple sill and cornice line on the brick that are simply turned bricks that protrude from the wall. We're trying to keep that very, very simple and monolithic. We have then some texture of brick setting in and out that flank the doorway to give a little bit of difference, subtle difference and detail at the pedestrian level of the experience of the house. The windows are proposed to be Marvin casement. They're wood clad with aluminum on the outside, painted gray. I think we'll get to the palette shortly. As it turns and faces Chauncey, this is the private side of that the corner house. There's a wood fence in the back that separates in line with the face of the house. Oops, this is the back. So the brick wraps the first house to essentially its leaders, and then the rest of it is stucco. None of these are light and air windows. They're all stairways and bathrooms. It's basically a sort of confetti of those. This is the metal system is also flush to the brick. It's not sloped at this point, which you'll see in one of the renderings. And this is that sort of alleyway facing side. So the brick wraps here, and there's a few, these are lot line windows. So we're limited in the area that they can have, but they're there nonetheless to provide obviously some light and opening and relief to an otherwise blank wall. And this is obviously set back. We're trying to set back from either side so that again, the top floor or penthouse is not, doesn't have a lot of presence. So this is the palette that we're talking about. You know, a typical modular brick that's a blonde brick. There are examples of blonde brick in the neighborhood, but frankly, most of that color is related to limestone. But it certainly exists in the latter in the later vintage of row houses, brick row houses in the neighborhood. And then the mansard of a sort we're proposing in zinc, not a painted metal, that has that would be two tones. The darker would be associated directly with the brick, and the lighter would be the setback portion, hoping that it would recede visually. There's a section. We do have a roof, occupiable roof, relatively small behind that mansard, and we have we've made that top floor, those bulkheads, as low as they can possibly be, at least for the rooms behind them. So this is the view from, like, I don't know if this is Troy or Lewis at this point. It's certainly Fulton. You can get a great distance from this this proposal. So you're always going to see what's above that roof line. Certainly, there will obviously be trees planted in front of this, but this is the sort of main view if you're approaching by vehicle from the south, headed toward the district. And then this is coming the other way, south on Lewis. And this is the view from Chauncey, which the goal here was to have it really be much more sort of intimate, to marry nicely, we hope, to the neighboring wood houses. Those upper sort of dormers are sort of innie dormers that help sort of lighten the mass of this brick wall, just the way that we've cut out the entryway there. And that looks like it's it.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions at this time? All right, Commissioner Goldblum, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the rooftop element. Is it just stairs, or is there space in there? Did I miss the plan?
Yeah. Oh, there wasn't there an appendix to this? There they are. There they are. There they are. It was beyond that. Okay, so let's get to the roof plan. There they are. So there are obviously 4 stairs. We've eliminated any room at the ends, and we've basically combined what would otherwise be a volume of, I guess it would be 3. There'd be, if the volume just enclosed the stairs, you'd have 1 large one and 2 small ones. And so, while of course ownership is delighted to have a little bit of extra floor area, we did feel that having a single volume up there was better than 3, sort of 2 little ones and 1 big one, that it was quieter.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Jefferson, and just accept my request to unmute.
The planter strip, how deep is it? Is it 4 feet, or is it just the number of steps to go up to the facade?
It's, you're talking about this right here, this planting strip?
Yeah, yes, the broken planting strip. and the depth of it from the facade? And the second question is, are those garbage? You put the garbage on the facade. Is that what you see? Is what that the?
Yes.
Are those garbage?
We've set the bulk of the building, or the street wall of the building, to line up with the neighbor on Bainbridge. So there is roughly 3 feet there. I think it might be 2 and some very odd number. On this drawing, it says 3 feet. So it's 3 feet. And so there's a planter on the top, and then tucked underneath it is room for garbage recycling, that sort of thing, behind metal doors.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, we might have more questions after testimony, but why don't we turn now?
Should I mute?
Sorry.
Should I mute?
Yes, that would be great, Tom. Thank you. Okay, and we'll turn to public testimony now. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak, please raise your hand using the icon at the bottom of your screen. And if we'll begin with anyone who signed up in advance, but we will get to everybody else who has their hand raised as well. And I will turn it over to Lisa Kersavage to walk us through the testimony.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And again, I will start with people that signed up in advance. And I'm going to start with Kelly Carroll. And Kelly, I've brought you in. There you go.
Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. HDC is an advocate of the row house, and we welcome new construction of this typological tradition. In Stuyvesant Heights, a neighborhood known for its unparalleled preserved rows, we offer some views of how these millennial row homes can be better neighbors. First, the brick should be an earthy red in dialogue with the older row houses. Second, more study is needed in how the facades will meet the interpreted mansard roofs, because details work overtime in this historic district. Third, the looming bulkhead should disappear because mansard roofs do not wear rooftop additions well. Finally, the stoops and planters need further study in how they connect the private residential space to the public sidewalk to look less like a residential complex and more like a part of this Brooklyn street. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Next we'll have George Calderaro, followed by Solange Franklin-Reed. Okay, George, I've brought you in.
Good morning. I'm George Calderaro, Chair of the Preservation Committee of the New York Metro chapter of the Victorian Society in America. The Victorian Society enthusiastically supports construction of new row houses on vacant lots in historic districts characterized by this building type. In this presentation, the applicant shows a variety of exquisite row houses that characterize this district, any one of which could serve as a model for new construction. It is a puzzle, therefore, that the applicant has chosen to model his development on a forlorn Second Empire house missing its cornices, with the missing cornices being a major feature of the new design. The elements of the design, the mansards, multiple sizes and types of windows, and asymmetrical masonry dormer, like extensions at the third floor, seem to be borrowed from a variety of times and places and do not coalesce into a coherent whole. Other problems are the bulkhead, which should be a different material from the roof and should reflect the individual houses, and what appear to be trash receptacle containers lining the sidewalk. While we applaud the effort to minimize trash receptacles and vermin, this is the urban equivalent of being greeted by a row of projecting garages fronting a suburban street. Other solutions include dedicating parking spaces to covered trash storage. Along with the privilege of building in an historic district comes the responsibility of designing exemplary buildings that have their own stylistic integrity and a harmonious relationship with their historic neighbors. This does not mean a conversation where the languages are so different they are unintelligible to each other. While we applaud the concept of building row houses here and find the proposed scale appropriate, we believe this proposal is beyond being amenable to tweaking, and we recommend it being denied and a fresh start made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next we have Solange Franklin-Reed. And I have promoted you to a panelist, and then she'll be followed by Evelyn Collier and then Carla Tabb. Okay, and you just need to, yeah, there you go.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. My name is Solange Franklin-Reed. I'm a homeowner at 63 Chauncey Street. I'm here as a representative for the over 30 neighbors serving as signatories on a letter of opposition to this project. These 34 residents live on the same block as 39 Chauncey Street. I will read the letter on our behalf. I also just, is it okay if I start the video?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, hi. Dear Landmarks Preservation Commission, we write in regards to the application for new development at 39 Chauncey Street in the Stuyvesant Heights Historic District. We are all residents and homeowners on the block of Chauncey Street between Lewis and Stuyvesant Avenues, and so are directly affected by this proposed development. It would be part of our family's daily lives for years to come. Most of us only learned about the existence of this application and saw the plans for the proposed development just a few days before its scheduled hearing on Friday, December 4th or later. As we're sure you can appreciate, community organizing and the normal sharing of neighborhood information has been hindered by COVID-19. Nonetheless, in the short time since discovering that this application was imminently being considered for a certificate of appropriateness, it has become clear that many of us are concerned that we have not been consulted or included in this process. As a result, we have not had adequate time to review the proposal, seek advice, and submit a fulsome response. We all live next to this proposed development. It is a substantial structure comprising of 4 new street side units, which is a drastic change from what has existed on this lot in the past. Despite the little time we've had to review the proposal, it is evident that the new building will significantly alter the character and aesthetic of this historic block. The architecture, design, and external features of the structure are like nothing else nearby. And the materials and colors of the facade and exterior elements, the Durango blend brick and the charcoal colored standing seam zinc don't resemble any of the homes on the block of Chauncey Street of which this building would be a part. The proposal appears to cherry pick architectural and aesthetic elements from various locations in the Stuyvesant Heights Historic District to support its design, none of which are found on or near the block where the developer is actually intending to build. Their study of mansard roofs, for instance, includes not one such roof on or within side of our block or the lot where they want to put this development. Similarly, with their study of buildings with bay windows on secondary facades. What results is an architectural hodgepodge that does not cohere with or complement the buildings around it. Additionally, they provide a study of corner housing sets, which to our eye does little to bolster their proposal. To the contrary, the photos of these stately, historic corner buildings accentuate how dramatically out of place the structure they're proposing would look. Some of us have owned homes on this block for decades. Others are relatively new homeowners here. Others of us are renters of varying tenures on Chauncey Street. This block of Chauncey Street has a history of promoting preservation and architectural appreciation as a source of civic pride. The Brownstoners of Bedford-Stuyvesant, a community organization that for the last 42 years has run a widely beloved house tour showcasing the architecture of Bed-Stuy, was founded in 1978 in the kitchen of one of our homes, and this block has been a stop on the tour over the decades. This is a wonderful quintessential Brooklyn block, the best block in Brooklyn. We've been known to remark to each other while spending time together admiring it from our stoops. Please don't take this letter as indiscriminate opposition. We appreciate that some use should be found for the lot at 39 Chauncey Street. But given the character of this specific block within the Stuyvesant Heights Historic District and the minimal time we've had to consider this, we believe that the current proposal is not appropriate. We respectfully request A, that you not award a certificate of appropriateness to these plans. B, that you direct the developer to take account of the architecture and design of the homes that are on the actual block where they wish to build, and to come back with reimagined plans that properly reflect and complement the historic houses on Chauncey Street. And C, that you kindly keep us updated on the status of this application and informed of any new plans submitted for the proposed project. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next, Evelyn Collier. And I just ask everybody to please keep your remarks to 3 minutes. And Evelyn, you just need, there you go, yes.
Okay, I thought you wouldn't be able to find me. Hi, good morning. I'm Evelyn Collier, Chair of the Landmark Committee for Community Board 3. I'm here to speak about application LPC 20-05535 for 39 Chauncey. The application to construct a new residential building for 39 Chauncey on the corner of Lewis Avenue was presented for a new hearing, a review hearing at the scheduled meeting, a landmarks and preservation meeting, October the 15th. The new residential building will be situated on a vacant lot within the Stuyvesant Heights Historic District. The four townhouses. It was formerly the site of the Neo-Georgian Romanesque revival style apartment building designed by John L. Young in 1899 and a vernacular house built prior to 1870. The original buildings were previously demolished by Housing Preservation and Development in 1995 and 2002 as a result of fire and due to safety concern. The committee concerns and comments on the proposed new buildings are windows and window openings do not reference the surrounding architecture and character, size, or spacing. There are no defined lintels or sill. The townhouse scheme with 4 primary entrances require further study or definition of the 4 individual buildings. The brick color is too light and the metal panels are numerous. The Lewis Avenue elevation with 4 panel brick elements at the 3rd level creates the effect of a single industrial building. The change of material from brick to standing seam metal at the 3rd level reference a mansard roof, but is unclear in doing so. The lack of a defined edge and the additional 4th floor, although setback, are incongruous with that approach. Recessed doorways and brick panels, knee walls along Lewis Avenue are atypical. Fixed metal panels and the 4 main entrances are also atypical. The site zoning structure is unclear. The extremely modern design is not appropriate within the historic district, especially situated along one of the most prominent corridors. Therefore, the Brooklyn Community Board 3 resolves to disapprove of the proposed new residential building as presented. The full board voted 39 in favor, no against, 0 against, no abstention, 0 present. And we thank you for the opportunity of presenting.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, and then we have Carla Tab. Carla, you can just unmute yourself and turn on your video if you choose.
Sure. Am I visible?
Yes, and we can hear you.
All right, wonderful. Morning, everyone. I'm so glad that Solange Franklin Reed was able to speak on behalf of the block. I just want to pretty much echo all of her sentiments as being a resident of the block as well, living on the block my entire life. I just really quickly, because I think Solange, you covered everything. I just find it very telling that at the beginning of the presentation for this development, Tom begin with starting with the examples in which there were some erasure of the fabric of the architecture of that very, very close surrounding neighborhood. One, by bringing up the buildings that were atypical on Bainbridge, and then also the cul-de-sac that's found on the other side of the Bainbridge. And it just seemed like as though it was a perfect prelude for the design that he put forth, because it seemed like all it pretty much did was continue to erode the aesthetic of the neighborhood, which I'm hoping that with the help of the commissioners of the housing preservation development, I'm hoping that that's not going to be something that would be allowed or approved. And we have such a rich history of architecture found in Stuyvesant Heights. And I just hope that the next design that comes forth takes from that example. And, you know, Commissioner Fred Bland said precedent. There's really no precedent evident in this design. So I hope that that would be taken into consideration. And I'm looking forward to see what the next draft will look like, because the neighborhood is watching this very closely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm sorry, could you just state your name for the record? Oh, sorry, that was Carla Tabb, I can say. And I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, Rich, do we have any written testimony?
No other additional written testimony.
Okay, thank you. All right, Tom, would you like to respond to many of the comments or all of the comments that you've heard?
Tom, if you could just unmute yourself.
I'm trying. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think that obviously we're amenable to a fair amount of change, so we're looking forward to hearing the commissioner's comments. I do feel as though while it's clear that there's some commonalities between a lot of the testimony, especially regarding the planters and the immediate streetscape, the brick color, that I would hope that that there would be some consideration given to a contemporary scheme here at the corner. It certainly is maybe erring on the side of monolithic and stripped down, and we're happy to investigate adding some detail. Part of the reason that we did this, though, is because these houses are relatively small, and as you add detail to them, it can seem it can give them a sort of a cute character that didn't seem to us to be a very contextual or appropriate. But we understand that's a balance, and I look forward to the commissioner's advice.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, I'm going to start unmuting you, or in some cases requesting to unmute. So look for that request so that we can close the hearing and move to our discussion. So Commissioner Halford-Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
Great. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, and before we begin our discussion, I do want to note for the record that Commissioner Lutfi is recused on this item, and she has not been present for this presentation. And so with that, we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start on this one?
You betcha. This is the kind of project that makes it fun to do it because it's really hard and it's really interesting. It puts you to the test. And I must say, I was initially rather daunted at Moses presenting the project to us. I thought
Moses from Oaxaca.
That was an unfair position. It's kind of like you take your leadership, but I think I'll have to stand up to that pressure. The other problem with this project, Mr. is that it plays directly to my personal weakness, which is the brutalist period of architecture. It reminds me of a Cambridge 7 dorm in some college town. It has a very familiar feel to it, the asymmetry, the flatness. Let me say this. I think that the planning gestures are 100% correct. I think that the breaking down of the site into 4 small houses, I think that the setting back to make alignments, I think that even the use of the mansard technique to vary the profile is an appropriate set of choices. I think that this project is almost okay in my book, and I imagine that would not be a shared feeling, but that's the benefits of going first. I think that it does. I think you really do need to dial up the cute. I think you were your own best critic. I think that you need to add detail and depth. And I would say that that one of the commentators from the neighborhood was spot on by saying that you should resist the urge to cherry pick your sources and look much more closely and value much more highly the precedence of the immediate adjacent site. And I think looking at if you go to the slide that shows the immediate streetscapes either side of you, what struck me was a couple of things. The first thing that struck me was polychromy. In the buildings to your left on this rendering, the paired buildings, you have precast plus brick. You have, at a squint, the buildings are 2 colors, and that animates what are otherwise relatively flat buildings. Buildings to your right, down the block, if you kind of skip over the wood houses, that very large row is dominated by an A-B color scheme. That's the animating quality of that row. Either of those techniques would suit you well. And the thing that makes this a Cambridge 7 project is the flatness and the relative proportions of the windows. I have absolutely no problem with, and I applaud your proud modern approach, but the proportion of window to wall has a kind of meager quality to it that I think gives it an institutional feel that is alien to the district, and that is added to by the depth at which the windows are set. The shallow depth doesn't help you either. I think that there was some comment in the testimony about the bulkhead. I think that the bulkheads are fine being visible, but I think that they should be broken up to reflect the individuality of the houses and be separated in such a way that they create a streetscape that reinforces the impression of 4 individual houses. I think that the setback that we're seeing in this rendering is effectively used, but I think that the foregrounding of trash bins is, there must be a better way to do it that doesn't give it such focus. I think that the bay window on the other street really reads more as a greenhouse And I think the opportunity to create a relationship with the immediate neighbors, which have porches on the ground floor, is really just a matter of articulation. Or, it could be a bay window, but the bay windows have a different kind of architectural relationship with the body of the building that kind of very simple box, I think, lacks. So I would just say, in summation, keep it modern, keep it the way you've got it, but dial it up.
Thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
Thank you, Michael. That's pretty much exactly where I was. I'm thinking of this. I'm reminded of Paul Byard and his architecture of additions and discussions that we had many times with Jan also about building being of their time. And this is where we are. And I don't have a lot of problems with this other than, essentially what Michael said. Give me a little bit more. There's almost too much Cambridge 7 to me. There's that flatness on the facades. I'm really okay with this, but give me some more depth. Give me some more meat in this, and I would be okay with it.
Thank you. Commissioner Bland.
Before I comment, I want to tell the architect that on my morning walks down to Brooklyn Bridge Park, I'm so in admiration of something we approved not so long ago on Fulton Street, a little row of a retail building, which looks quite fabulous, quite frankly. And secondly, if you're in Oaxaca, I'm completely envious of all the places in the world that I might want to ever be an expat. I could move to Oaxaca tomorrow. It's a fantastic place with great food. Now we'll move on. So I'll echo, but without as much length as Commissioner Goldblum, who was very articulate. By the way, as was the testimony. I really enjoyed the testimony. I thought it was extraordinarily articulate. And although I think so far the third person to speak about the appropriateness perhaps of a contemporary approach may not be what the neighbors are anticipating, but I will also echo that much of this is right. Certainly the plans I think are very interesting. I think that the tilt on the both ends, different as they are, one toward a park and so forth, is the right thing to do. Again, I don't ever I try not to suggest design approaches, and certainly with a good architect like Tom is, I won't here either. But, it all adds up to something that isn't quite right. And I think the color of the brick is part of the problem. But it also adds up to a monolithic building. Cambridge 7, maybe. I hadn't thought of that until it's been said. Now I'll be the third to say, yeah, maybe. But that means that the individual townhouses are somehow not differentiated enough. And I'm not suggesting that they need to be differentiated so much one from the other. Look at the history of New York, Manhattan, and Brooklyn townhouses, rows and rows of similar houses. But somehow they don't end up looking like a bigger building. They still look like individual houses. And there's something missing here in terms of that, because this ends up looking like one building. And I don't think you need to dramatically change the approach to the design to fix that, but I think it does need to be fixed. I'll sort of leave it at that. I mean, there's all sorts of things to pick apart. Maybe is the mansard appropriate or not? I'm not sure it's not. And so forth. And I have to appreciate living as I do in a row house with the problem of the garbage cans ever present. And I live at number 26 Pierpont, well, right down the street from me at number, I guess it's 14, or there are two rows that have dealt with the garbage just this way. And I appreciate it. I walk by it all the time, and I sort of appreciate how nice it is that they're behind a designed idea. So as opposed to just garbage cans hanging out. So anyway, those are just some additional comments, but I hope you do keep it contemporary, but make it a little less severe.
Thank you. All right, and Commissioner Jefferson.
I think your planning of leaving a space on both sides is really wonderful. It really sets this as a special building at the corner. And I think you're almost there, but the issue with the garbage and the planters is difficult for me. It's not a forecourt. It's not, I don't know what it is. It symbolically, it bothers me that you see the garbage thing. The facade itself is simple enough, and I like the rhythm of the dormers. And when I saw it the first time, I said, gee, those rhythms really work. And I like that. I didn't know, the window illustration I have a question about, especially the way they penetrate the dormer and the wall and the mansard. And on the right side, you have the window, the brick coming up to the mansard roof, and the window penetrates the mansard roof, which I find awkward. The bulkhead, I think, as another commissioner said, should be simple volumes, and it would work beautifully. I think what bothers me the most of this is the color. I mean, it's already a statement, and the color makes it a double statement. And if you simplify the color to red brick, it'd be beautiful. It'd work wonderful. And just deal with that base level of planters and the windows in the back. It's okay, I guess. But as a whole, I think it does work. And the criticism of having it look like separate buildings, if that could be achieved, it would work even better. That's my thoughts.
Sarah, you're muted.
You're Rich. Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, I'm going to echo what a lot of people have already said. The idea of 4 row houses is fantastic. I do want to make sure we emphasize that is, as a testimony went, that's a very big positive. What Commissioner Jefferson just said about the 4 row houses being somehow or other defined from one another a little bit better, I think is a good point. I would also echo the comments about the brick color. That may be an issue. And Commissioner Jefferson commented on the fenestration, I think, which is somewhat awkward. I think Commissioner Bland said contemporary is fine, but less severe. And Commissioner Goldblum noted dial it up. And I think that's basically where I am on this whole thing.
Thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Boy, I agree with so many of the comments. I do think that the approach is interesting and one that I think is appropriate. That is a contemporary approach. In somehow it really suits the exact location. And I agree with so many of the comments. My trouble with it, and okay, I don't know that it's trouble. Maybe it's a personal kind of issue preference, and that is I'm trying to wonder why it is that I don't want to live there, and I don't want to. That's not a criteria. So what does it mean? And then I'm asking myself, kind of what would it mean to live there in a way that could bring some joy? And I think that it has to do with the points that both Michaels made about the dialing it up. But I don't know that it's dialing it up in terms of depth or slightly different color or something. It just has to do with maybe some sort of secret details that you would discover or know were there in the kind of in the actual jamb of the window or in the nose of the step or something that were really these kind of very fine-grained and almost invisible in terms of the general palette things that you would know were embedded in the design, and I think this designer certainly has the capacity to do that. So all in all, I think this is very appropriate and very thoughtful and innovative. And I guess my desire would be for the kind of the more of the project that we may not even know, as we see it before us at this scale.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Well, I think everyone, all the comments so far, I agree with pretty much all of the comments. So I'm not going to repeat them. I think one thing that does really bother me, along with Everardo, is the fact that the trash is kind of front and center. But also perhaps that there's maybe too much zinc on the back of the building. And we haven't really focused on that, but I think that might make the mansard a little more special if the back of the building were simplified. But I think the overall gesture of the planning, the overall approach is very appropriate. And with the comments that have been made by everyone so far, I think it'll be very successful.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin.
I feel like the massing is okay, but I found this, from my point of view, very really not contextual, not fitting in, and really not standing out in a good way at this point. That said, I agree with other commissioners that a modern approach is definitely possible here. I think that the idea of going for the row house approach and creating a sort of modern row house is fine, would really work. I felt looking at the project that I almost was looking at, it looked more like a mansion or something. It really wasn't differentiated into the row houses. It seemed like a single building more with multiple dormers and the mansards. I felt a bit like what some of the neighbors said, that it in my mind was the word hodgepodge, because I felt that the architect had taken a number of elements and tried to put them together in a way to create a contextual sense, but somehow those just weren't working in the right way together for me. And I also think that the color and is not tying in well with the neighboring buildings at this point. And I had a similar concern with some of the other commissioners about the proportion, the sort of irregularity of the fenestration. I almost felt like maybe it should be more modern, even than, so to speak. I mean, I'm not sure, but I just didn't feel that it really is fitting in contextually for me with the neighborhood in the way it's approached right now. But I think that the approach of a modern design and the row house concept is good. And for me right now, the planters aren't really, they're not helping to make it more appropriate from my perspective. Those were.
Great, thank you, commissioners. I'd like to thank you, as always, for all of your thoughtful comments. So I think where we are is we will take no action today. Generally, what I've heard is support for this particular contemporary approach, and support for the approach to express it as 4 row houses, but a desire to see more ways that you can emphasize the individuality of the row houses, and that could be, the bulkhead, that it can be in the details or the fenestration proportions. I think we've also heard some comments about the color of the brick, the garbage enclosure planters right at the areaway, in lieu of an areaway, and that needs to be resolved. And the sort of the level of detail, whether perceptible or not, whether it's depth and more detail, or sort of detail that supports the style, but it isn't necessarily too too referential, but I think that there's more details, and those details need to be sort of resolved within the style. So I think it's a general support for the direction and asking you to think about it further in those various ways that I just described and summed up. And the staff will help you and sort of go through all of the commissioner's comments carefully. And we'll have you back when you have a revised design. And we will also let all of the neighbors know when that project is back so that everyone has ample time to review the revised design. All right, so we'll take no action and we'll move to the next item. Thank you.
All right, the next item is number 4, docket number 19-37213. 519 2nd Street in the Park Slope Historic District, Borough of Brooklyn, Block 1076, Lot 65, an application for a certificate of appropriateness. A Romanesque revival style house designed by Robert Dixon, James Nelson, and J.L. Allen and built in 1894 to 98. And the application is to modify the areaway and stoop.
And commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. Please note that staff will be presenting components of the proposal with the applicants available for questions at the end. And staff, if you could just unmute yourself, you now have control of the presentation and you may begin. Michelle, if you could just unmute yourself. Michelle, we seem to be having some trouble with your audio. Can you unmute yourself?
Edith, do you want to just hand it over to me and I'll walk them through it?
Sure, I can do that. Just one moment. Okay, Bernadette, you can introduce yourself and begin.
Good morning, Commissioners. Bernadette Artis, Preservation Department staff. This application is for 519 2nd Street in Park Slope. It is a proposal for barrier-free access alterations at the areaway and stoop. This is the existing conditions at the house. This is showing existing and proposed elevations. And the way they're proposing to provide barrier-free access is to lower the areaway grade. It's currently concrete. So they would lower that down, replace the concrete with bluestone paving, and add a step. So the photo on the left is the existing conditions of the house. The photo on the right is another property in this street. So it's a similar areaway setup. And you can see at the bottom on the left, there is an added step. So that's what the applicants are proposing at this areaway. If you look at the photo, you can notice the steps are gray. They're currently coated with concrete, and the applicant is proposing a cast in place concrete step at the base of the stoop. The side of the stoop and the side of the inboard side of the areaway wall will be resurfaced in stucco, so it will look like a continuous of the brownstone going down further. At the base of the building, which will also be exposed because the areaway is being lowered, there's what appears to be concrete smeared over bluestone. A member of the commission staff went out and looked at it, and that's what it appears to be. And they're proposing concrete for there as well. There is no proposed change to the gate at the side of the stoop. They will leave that in place, and there'll be a small gap underneath it that will happen with the areaway grade changes. When this was presented to the community board, the proposal was also included replacing the hatch with a new unpainted hatch. They've changed that, and they're now proposing to paint it black, which will be consistent with what we approve at staff level. So that's being reviewed at staff level. This is showing existing and proposed conditions in section. You can see the added step and the new slope that will come down to the existing gate. The elevation is inaccurate and showing a door. There's no change to the gate proposed. I'll just go back. So these are some more existing condition photographs of the areaway. Demo plan, an existing and proposed plan. The owner, has also provided some detailed drawings if the commissioners would like to see those as well.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead. You have to.
I'm having a problem with the image. I only have the previous project. I don't have the new project. Is it just me, or other people are having that?
It might be you. The presentation is working for me. I wonder if it's a connection problem.
Right.
Maybe try refreshing.
Oh.
Okay. Other questions?
Not just me.
All right. Okay, so if there are no questions at this time on the proposal, we'll turn to public testimony. If you are here to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Okay, great. We have 2 people signed up. We'll start with George Calderaro, followed by Kelly Carroll. So George, I've brought you in. Please just state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. George Calderaro from the Victorian Society, New York. The Victorian Society notes that this row of houses is characterized by stoops alternating in brownstone and limestone, but there are elements of consistency that should be maintained. First, each house incorporates a threshold or step extending across the yard entrance and connecting the stoop and areaway walls in the same material. Second, a projecting bluestone basement windowsill continues as a bluestone sill course on either side of the window. We recommend that a brownstone threshold separate the sidewalk from the areaway paving at the stoop wall to maintain this continuity of materials. The existing step can perhaps be repurposed, and that the projecting bluestone sill course also remain and be restored with a different appropriate masonry material below the sill course down to grade. We have no objection to the other proposed changes, which are similar to existing minor alterations to the row's stoops and areaways that don't appear to significantly detract from the row. We also suggest the applicant consider the potential problem with draining the entire areaway to the basement door, and this will include water draining from the stoop surface as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next we have Kelly Carroll.
Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. Thanks to a site visit from one of our public review committee participants, an areaway feature unique to this row of houses was brought to our attention. This row shares a course of bluestone beneath the garden floor's window, which runs horizontally from stoop to stoop. This proposal seeks to remove it and cover this area in a brownstone stucco, and we ask that this bluestone course remain. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see any other hands raised.
Thank you. And Rich, do we have any additional written testimony?
Yes, we do have a resolution from Community Board 6 in Brooklyn. Aside from the hatch being painted a matte black color, the board recommended conditional approval stating that the size of the bluestone pavement should be increased to a more contextual size, and to make the tint of the cement that'll be placed on the stoop with, that'll match the existing brownstone.
All right, thank you. All right. I'd like to ask the owner, I think, who's present, if they'd like to respond to the comments that we've heard and some of the suggestions that were raised in the testimony.
Sure. Scott Rosenthal here, commissioners. The issue of the bluestone underneath the window has been discussed at length with Landmarks, and we are willing to use a bluestone for that curb material as opposed to the cement alternative, if that's more amenable to the parties. The only issue that we cannot, I think, conceivably accommodate as part of the response to a comment was maintaining a step which would defeat the purpose of creating a barrier-free, handicap-accessible access to the areaway through the knee wall opening. But other than that, the bluestone dimensions are all open to some form of consensus, provided that the material itself is available and the dimensions that are ultimately settled upon.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Devonshire, would you like to, wait, sorry, I have to close the hearing. Commissioner, do we have any additional questions first? Final questions? Okay, so let's go ahead and make a motion to close the hearing. And Commissioner Bland, would you make that motion?
Yes, motion to close the hearing.
Thanks. And Commissioner Shamir Baran, would you second that motion?
Second that motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, let's go ahead and start the discussion. And Commissioner Devonshire, would you like to go ahead and start?
Sure, thanks, Sarah. I am in general approval of the project and the design. I think the real issues are going to be determining what materials and finishes are used. I agree that the bluestone curb should be replaced with bluestone. With regard to the steps, I imagine they are brownstone that were had applied cement on them at some point, and I think the applicant can work with the staff to come up with a new application, a new cementitious application that more closely resembles the brownstone of the cheek walls. And so once they do that, I'm okay with it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Bland?
I'm okay, just as Michael has just said, yes.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi?
Yeah, I'm okay with those, with approving it with, in keeping with what Michael said as well.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson?
It's okay. I approve it.
Commissioner Gustafson?
Yep, same here.
Commissioner Shamir Baran?
Yes, same for my part.
Commissioner Holford Smith?
I agree. I think that also the comment in testimony of keeping a threshold across so where the knee wall interruption is at the entrance into the yard would help sort of mimic where that step used to be. That was a good comment. Otherwise, I agree with everything that Michael said.
Okay, great. And Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I agree with the proposal in general, and just that the materials should be worked on with the staff, both the bluestone and also the, using something other than just the concrete to on the step and the base, and as Michael said.
Okay, and Commissioner Goldblum?
In agreement.
Okay, great. So Commissioner Devonshire, I think we are all in agreement to approve this with the conditions about the materials that you stated. And I think we can also encourage them to explore the idea of maintaining the threshold as well. So will you go ahead and make that motion?
Sure. I wish I could remember what I said.
The bluestone curb and cementitious stucco on the stoop to recall the brown, or to match the brownstone.
In the matter of LPC 19-37213, 519 2nd Street in the Park Slope Historic District, of Romanesque Revival style house designed by Robert Dixon, James Nelson, J.L. Allen, built in 1894-98, an application to modify the areaway and stoop. I recommend approval with some modifications, finding that the work will provide barrier-free access without eliminating or damaging any significant architectural features. The addition of a step to the stoop and exposure of below-grade masonry will not detract from the harmonious proportional relationships of the facade and stoop. That the proposed bluestone paving will be in keeping with historic paving in terms of material and finish and feature a typical rectilinear pattern. That the alterations will be largely screened from view from public thoroughfares by the stoop and areaway wall, further helping them remain a discrete presence at the house and within the streetscape. And the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building, site, or historic district. However, I find that the proposed concrete for the step and the base of the facade will not be in keeping with the masonry materials historic used of facades and stoops of houses of this age and style, will not relate well to the historic materials at the house and throughout the landscape. Therefore, I recommend that the stone, cast stone, and stucco coated masonry replicating the appearance of the historic masonry be selected in consultation with commission staff for the stoop and the facade.
Okay, and the curb, yeah.
And
And
the-
Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Letby,
Aye.
and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor and unopposed, the motion carries.
So that's approved with those modifications, and Mr. Rosenthal just continue to work with the staff on resolving those final issues on the materials. And we'll move to the next item, which will be our last item before our lunch break.
Sarah, I was just informed that the applicant for this item is not here at the moment.
He just showed up. He just showed up.
Okay, all right, then I'm going to go ahead and read it into the record. Item number 5 is docket number 20-07926, 525th Street, the Greenwood Cemetery, Fort Hamilton Parkway entrance and chapel, an individual landmark, Brooklyn, Borough of Brooklyn, Block 902, Lot 1, application for a certificate of appropriateness. A high Victorian Gothic style residence and visitors lounge built in 1876 to 77 and designed by Richard Mitchell Upjohn. The application is to alter fencing, install a new fence, construct a ramp, and modify the entrance court.
And commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the screens. Please unmute yourself and state your name for the record, and then you may begin the presentation.
Okay. Can you see me?
No, we can hear you.
Okay. My name is Josh Brandt from Brenner. I'm the architect retained by Greenwood Cemetery for this project. So how do I control?
So you take your mouse and you can click on the screen that you see there, and
Yes,
that'll activate the presentation, and then you can use the mouse or the arrow keys to advance the slides.
I'm not seeing the slides though. There we go. Thank you. Okay. Greenwood Cemetery is an important amenity for the neighborhood, the borough, and the city of New York. At almost 500 acres, it is a very large tourist attraction. The Fort Hamilton Gatehouse and residence by Richard Upjohn are important architectural landmarks on their own, while also providing access to the cemetery for a large portion of the borough. The main gate is a very long way away. The main gate up here is a very long way away from the Fort Hamilton Gate. The Greenwood Cemetery in general typically receives about 300 visitors per year. This year, that's almost, it's going to exceed 500,000 visitors a year. This gate is now open 7 days a week from April through October, and the cemetery expects that they will receive more than 100,000 visitors through this gateway. Our proposal, which I'll get to in detail, is for a modified fence at one side and then a accessible ramp at the gatehouse. So let me go to the next slide. So the sequence, this whole sort of, both these buildings and the fencing sort of function as an ensemble. The sequence from Fort Hamilton Parkway, along the parkway, there's a low masonry fence, a low masonry wall with a decorative ironwork fence on top of it. This is the residence, this is the gatehouse, largely subsumed with plantings on the left side and then a little bit more bare on the right side. So the sequence is that pedestrians and vehicles approach this gate, which is the same sort of the ornate gate, same as the ironwork on top of the fence, proceed through this driveway. There's then a secondary set of gates, and then they approach a guardhouse, and then they're in the cemetery proper. So these two buildings, the residence and the gatehouse, flank this driveway, which comes off of Fort Hamilton. So we have just completed an LPC approved sort of once in a generation interior renovation of both of these buildings, both the interior of the residence and the interior of the gatehouse. The residence has traditionally been the residence for the home for the caretaker of the cemetery. It's now going to house the cemetery's arborist and his family. So it will function as it was intended originally as a family home. And the gatehouse has been renovated to include, we've updated bathroom facilities and has a little lounge, but primarily it's the bathroom facilities. One thing that I should also point out about the ensemble is that the two buildings kind of tie back to the street with these original arced iron fences. And they come back to fence posts there. And so there are a row of identical fence posts along the street, and then this fencing. This fencing is the same fencing that runs along the street for blocks and blocks and blocks. There's something like well over 12,000 linear feet of that fencing. So let me go down a page. We have some historic, this is very jumpy. We have some historic photographs of the residences, of the residents in the gatehouse from Fort Hamilton Parkway. And then, so jumping into detail about the proposal of the residence, this has been the backyard of the residence. Our proposal is to add a run of new steel fence from the gatehouse to the perimeter wall where the plantings are. There's an existing stump that needs to be removed, and then we would remove one section of pickets. This area would then become additional area for the cemetery to use for interments. All this area would remain dedicated as a rear yard to the residence. So we're trying to sort of both fulfill and expand the cemetery's function, and also provide the residents with some dedicated rear yard. This detail shows what the existing iron fence work looks like, that, as I mentioned, that runs along the street, the thousands and thousands of linear feet of this fence. Our new fences will be black powder coated steel, slightly lower, similar rhythm, not quite as ornate, not attempting to replicate the fence, but simply to sort of remain in the background without distracting or detracting from the original fence. And the fence would run to the house, but not touch the house, and then at the other end into the bushes to the stone wall, but not attached. So it's a freestanding fence. We're not trying to marry it to the existing fences. So then switching to the gatehouse. So with the completion of our renovation, the gatehouse now provides accessible public bathroom facilities. The nearest bathrooms, other bathrooms at the cemetery, are at the main gate, and the only other accessible bathrooms in the entire cemetery are at the crematorium. In order to make this gate accessible, we're proposing, so this is the driveway, this is the inner set of gates, there's a kind of a forecourt here. We're proposing an arced handicap accessible ramp with a brownstone wall, a brownstone clad wall, and a black iron curved railing that deliver you up to this landing. That landing would then be raised one tread in order to provide barrier-free access to this lounge room and barrier-free access to the bathrooms. The matching symmetrical porch on the other side would not be modified. So this is a before and after rendering with a brownstone wall clad. The building has quite a variegated set of brownstone textures and colors, but we would match sort of the ashlar pattern of the kind of ribbed cast brownstone that we're quite confident we can get a color that will one of these colors will match one of these colors. I should point out that if I can just go down a page. So our new ramp, can I zoom in? Yes, I can. So the intention is that the new brownstone wall stops shy of the column bases and the columns themselves, while extending the handicap, the railing above to provide continuity. And then in board of that, in section, the ramp, this concrete surface of the ramp marries continuously into the new raised landing, so that we're able to provide the safe continuous surface, but we're not docking our new wall into the existing brownstone. We're standing off from it. The other aspect that's pertinent is that the existing landing inside the porch has an encaustic tile surface that we are proposing to replicate there. So the best we can determine is that this encaustic tile was installed in the 1990s. The cemetery at the time sought out a manufacturer in England to make encaustic tiles. We have found a similar domestic manufacturer. So these samples show our color matches. So we're quite confident that we can match in color and in pattern the encaustic tile. You can see if I, nope, sorry. If I zoom in here, our new landing level covers this kind of rough, rustic flanged base, but does not cover any of the more dressed stone or decorative stone. That's the landing into the bathroom. So this red line denotes the level that we have to reach in order to provide a handicap accessible, barrier-free route. And this ramp, this similarly shows the pitch of the concrete ramp, land and the elevation of that new landing. Again, not subsuming or destroying the column bases or the little sort of floral column ornament. And so that's, I think I covered everything. So overall, these modifications we feel ensure the utility of these buildings for the cemetery and for the public, providing access to everyone who comes to the cemetery through this gate, while also honoring the important architectural character of these buildings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions for the applicant at this moment? All right.
Michael Devonshire seems to be raising his hand.
Oh, okay. I don't see that. Commissioner Devonshire, are you raising your hand?
No, I was grabbing my Luxo lamp, which decided to fall over. Sorry.
All right. So I think we don't have any questions at this time. So we'll move to public testimony, and I'll turn it over to Lisa to walk us through the testimony. And if you're in the meeting and would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. Lisa?
Okay, great. Thank you. We have two people signed up. Start with Kelly Carroll, followed by George Calderaro.
Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. After correspondence with Greenwood Cemetery, it appears that the LPC designation report from 2016 is incorrect in noting that encaustic tiles located on the porches date to the original construction of the building and were actually installed sometime in the 1990s. Therefore, we find their removal appropriate since they are not historic, but we ask that their replication be of the same quality as what currently exists. However, the proposed ramp needs restudy. It should connect to the porch at the base of the porch columns, and the brownstone capstones should remain proud of the ramp. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we have George.
George Calderaro from the Victorian Society. The Victorian Society in New York supports the location and graceful form of the proposed ramp, finding it will have relatively minor effect on the appearance and integrity of this extraordinary structure. However, the proposed destruction of the mosaic tile porch floor in remarkably fine condition is another matter. We have learned very late that, like HTC, that the existing floor is not original, but is a reproduction that may have been produced by a successor firm to the original maker. So we nonetheless suggest two possibilities for consideration that would allow for retention of the existing floor. They include constructing an open structure on top of it, possibly with a glazed floor. That structure could be pulled away from the perimeter to the porch, thus retaining the exposure of the column bases. A second possibility is a more substantial solid base with the reproduction tiles on top as proposed, but with the existing tile floor protected and the new platform not affixed to it. In the future, if this accessible entrance is no longer needed, the existing tiles would be intact and could be revealed. We also suggest the designer look at lowering the height of the new cast brownstone ramp wall by 1 course so that the wall's coping meets the bottom of the porch column base. This might be a trade-off to consider in that this change might increase unwanted visibility of the concrete ramp surface. Finally, the pair of ramp railings may not require vertical pickets, and omitting these verticals would allow the adjacent historic facade to read more clearly. These railings should be checked to ensure they meet ADA standards for required height and extensions. Concerning the yard fence at the residence, we think the design that incorporates somewhat more period detail, though definitely not replicating the historic fence, would be less conspicuous because of a better fit with the Victorian elements of its setting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see anybody else signed up or with their hand raised.
Thank you. And Rich, do we have any additional written testimony?
We do. We have a resolution from Brooklyn Community Board 7 recommending approval.
Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to turn back to the applicant to see if you'd like to respond to some of the comments, and then I think we will have some additional questions. So Mr. Brandfrontbrunner, would you like to speak to the intersection again of the ramp and the porch and the details of the fence or any other comments that you've heard?
Yes, thank you so much. The first comment about the capstone remaining proud of the ramp, proud of the column capitals, and I think I'm not exactly sure what they're getting at, but I think we've sort of done that by holding the capstone away from the column capitals. I think we've achieved that. The notion of removing a full course, the problem with that is if we remove a full course, the capstone ends up basically being on grade, which is sort of problematic. If you look in section, we didn't talk about the section detail too much here. Pardon me. Let me go page down to the section detail. You can see that we have one course on the ramp side. If we reduce that, the capstone sort of sits on the ramp, which is possible, less preferable. So both of those, I'm not exactly sure we can comply with. I think the notion of the plexiglass or glass floor is so that the existing tiles, the existing encaustic tiles can be seen. I think that's quite problematic, and that the imposition of a clear surface held up on stone offset on glass, metal offsets or something, I think is going to be far more sort of intrusive and not in keeping with the house than what we're proposing. In terms of, we can certainly, as we're pouring the new ramp, we can certainly put a separation layer, an isolation layer, some kind of membrane of some material that would isolate the new landing from what's below it for future restoration, and that is certainly possible. I would just point out that The existing encaustic tiles at the time that they were done in the 90s, according to the president of the cemetery, were done in Joseph Bresnan's office was the consulting architect at that time. And we feel it's a pretty strong, pretty good inference that what was done at the time in the 90s, even though we don't have any visual record of it, was to match whatever remained of the existing original tiles. And so we feel that we are maintaining a connection by further replicating that's our closest bet to a good replication.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, I know you have a question, so please go ahead.
Thanks. So 2 questions. First of all, what is problematic about having the coping sit on top of the ramp?
Weatherproofness and being able to shovel the ramp. I would be concerned that if we had I think having one course of vertical stone before we get to the capstone gives us a little better maintenance characteristics to the ramp, but we could certainly study it. If the direction is that you want us to lower the coping, lower that parapet wall, the curved wall, to get it flusher to the ground, I think we could. I think when you see it in practice, and presumably that planter, there'll be some form of planter remaining there. I don't think that intersection is going to be troublesome.
Thank you. Second question is, tell me about the curved fences. It seems that the original design was to create a kind of a apsidal areaway at the entrance that was formed by the 2 fences on either side, one from the gatehouse and one from the custodian's house. Explain to me why the imposition of a new fence is appropriate in regards to the original intent of the landscaping at the entrance to the cemetery.
Well, it seems that let me go up even one more image. It seems that this yard was intended, I mean, it's a slightly anomalous condition to have a house in a cemetery. I mean, houses do have there are caretakers' houses on cemeteries, but it's a little weird. I mean, when you're in the dining room here, literally 3 feet outside the window, there are headstones. I mean, the house is fully in the cemetery. So I think the original notion was that this yard really gave some private outdoor space that was cut off from the public. I mean, there are 100,000 people walking up and down here, that this yard was really private for the residents. This yard, I believe, was always public. There's nothing keeping the public from coming into this sort of apsidal area, as you said. So our notion is by introducing the fence that we're still keeping a sizable rear yard dedicated to the residents, which is sort of its original intention, but also providing by making that gap there and providing this area to the use of the cemetery, that we're helping the cemetery do what it was intended to do.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, commissioners? Oh, Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead.
If you go back to LPC 5, I just have a question. The fence on the right, proposed new fence, is that the image that I'm seeing in the perspective? Because it looks different.
Well, so this is, you got me. This is slightly abstract. So this is a technical drawing of what the existing fence would look like with the double rails at the top, which we felt sort of harkened back to the double rail at the top of this fence. This is what the fence would actually look like. The post spacing is a little bit tighter than the original, and it's certainly a good chunk lower, and it does not have, it's less ornate. But this is the original. This is the new proposed fence. and this fence is intended to be the same.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Hey, other questions, commissioners? No? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start to unmute and request to unmute you so that we can close the hearing and move into our discussion. All right, and Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Okay, and Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, and I want to just note for the record that Commissioner
Vote, we
Holford's-
need to vote.
Oh, sorry, thank you, John. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is now closed, and before we begin our discussion, I'm going to note for the record that Commissioner Holford Smith is recused on this item and has not been present for the presentation. So we'll go ahead and begin this one. And Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you like to start this one?
Sure. Let's see. Am I muted? Yes. So I sort of wish there could have been some other ways to use some of the historic fence or rail along the ramp, and to do something maybe a bit different at those steps. But I think overall, every effort's been made, I think, to do things which are that don't remove historic fabric, that don't really kind of block the sight lines of the historic material. So I think everything that's proposed is appropriate, and including the rounded arc ramp. I mean, if I would ask for anything, it would be for the rails along it to somehow maybe be a little bit thinner or have a little bit more detail about them. But otherwise, I think it's all I can approve it as presented.
And Commissioner Chapin?
I think that it's basically a good proposal, and I can actually approve it as presented.
Commissioner Goldblum?
I gotta vote no on this one. I think that the fence is breaking.
Can't hear you, Michael.
Sorry, I gotta vote against this one. I think that the fence is breaking the symmetry of the original intended design.
I can't hear you.
Still can't hear me. How's that? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Better?
That's good. That's better.
Okay. I will have to vote no on this. I think that the fence breaks the symmetry of the entry landscape design. And I think that the ramp is fine, but I would suggest that they lower the coping so that they're not relying on a planter to hide a mismatch.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
I can approve this.
Okay, Commissioner Bland?
I want to say ought to be the arborist at Greenwood Cemetery.
I was thinking the same thing.
I want to reapply or something, or apply for this job. I also just want to note how important this whole site is. I mean, it's extraordinarily important. It's hard to exaggerate how important it is. This is, after all, where Frederick Law Olmsted, as a younger guy, would come over from Staten Island and notice all the people having so much fun in this new open space that he thought maybe it would work in an urban park, and we get Central Park because of that, and then all the urban parks across the country, and ultimately, of course, Prospect Park, which was the greatest example. So it's hard to overemphasize the importance of the open space. And then, of course, Upjohn's work is simply extraordinary. And many of the details which come into what I'm going to talk about in just a second is Trinity Church, which is, of course, a great Upjohn example, probably his best example of a major church. So with all that said, and with great respect for Greenwood and all that they do, it's simply an extraordinary institution and place. I can approve all of this as is. I think it's very artfully done. I understand the reason for that new fence. I don't think it will not cause a visual disharmony in my judgment. I think the curved ramp is quite brilliant and beautiful. I would just urge that the applicant work very closely with staff to be sure that that connection between the ramp and the porch is done very carefully. But thank you. I think this is a beautiful proposal.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
Thank you, Fred, for saying all of that about Greenwood. It happens to be, as a native Brooklynite, happens to be one of my favorite parks. It's not only gorgeous, but there's so much history literally buried within it. And two very famous people from my life, my parents, that includes them, Ed and Isabel Lutfi. So I want to mention that. So I've spent a lot of time in here. And I definitely can approve this project. I feel like it's very well done. The removal of that small portion of the fence doesn't seem like an issue to me. And the new fence, blends in very harmoniously. I think that ramp is very understated and doesn't get in the way of the architecture. And I appreciate the fact that they're going to replicate that beautiful floor, even though it is not historic. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I think it was sensitively done, and I can approve it.
Commissioner Gustafson?
I guess I have a question for staff. Do we typically, in the context of an iron, a wrought iron or a cast iron fence, permit a fencing material of powder coated steel?
Why not?
I think we have. Caroline, do you want to speak to that?
I believe we have. It's not, it's a contrasting modern addition to the fencing. So.
Okay. Well, I'm with Commissioner Goldblum on this. I guess I may have felt a little differently about it if the materials were really going to match, and there was an effort in that regard. But I don't think it should be changing the symmetry. Everything else is fine, but that part is not.
Okay, thank you. All right, so and I want to also comment on how important a site this is, and that our landmarks here are landmarks that we're very proud of, and we appreciate the working relationship we've had with Greenwood Cemetery. And I think that in my view, I think that the proposal is very sensitively handled, isn't going to affect sightlines or historic fabric. So I'm on the side that can approve it. So I think with that, we have enough to support this project. So I'm going to ask Commissioner Shamir Barron if you'd make the motion, and then we'll take the vote and see where we are.
Yes, thank you. In the matter of LPC 2007926, 500 25th Street, Greenwood Cemetery, Fort Hamilton Parkway entrance and chapel, individual landmark, a high Victorian Gothic style residence and visitors lounge built in 1876 to 77, designed by Richard Mitchell Upjohn. The applications to alter fencing, install a new fence, construct a ramp, and modify the entrance porch. I recommend approval, finding that the removal of a small portion of the historic fence consisting of plain pickets will not cause the elimination of any decorative ironwork, that the simple design of the proposed new picket fence and its black finish will be harmonious with the existing historic fence and Victorian Gothic style of the residence, that the new fence will not block views of any historic features of the landmark site, and that the proposed ramp will provide barrier-free access in the least intrusive possible way. that the proposed ramp will be constructed of materials to match the adjacent facade material, that the ramp will be well integrated into the site by following the curve of the historic fence, that the decorative tile porch floor will be replicated in the new raised floor, that the portion of the porch columns and pilasters that will be covered by the raising of the porch floor are plain, non-decorative masonry plinths, and the more decorative portion of the bases will remain intact, and that the presence of the ramp and fence will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the landmark.
Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
And Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chapin, are you there?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
No.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Nay.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Okay, with 7 in favor and 2 opposed, the motion carries.
So that's approved. Thank you. And we are now going to break for 30 minutes for our lunch. And we'll ask everyone who's in the meeting, all attendees, to leave the meeting and return at 1 o'clock, or sorry, 10 after 1. And we will resume the afternoon session at that time. So commissioners, just turn your audio and video off. You do not need to leave the meeting. And again, if the public can just voluntarily leave the meeting so that we don't have to remove you, you'll be able to get in exactly the way you got in earlier today.